We're here today at the Extraordinary Futures Conference in Vancouver. I'm sitting down with Chris Bunka, CEO of Lexaria Biosciences. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great. It's always a pleasure to see you. And Chris, why don't we begin by you talking and telling our audience a little bit about Lexaria. They might not necessarily know about it. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do and what your focus is.
Absolutely. Well, Lexaria has been around for a while. We've been working in the biotech and cannabis space for about 5 years now. Filed a lot of patent applications starting all the way back in 2014. And we have developed a customized technology that delivers drugs way more effectively into the human body, both into human blood plasma as well, surprisingly, into and across the blood-brain barrier. So we can take a smaller quantity of drugs and deliver them more effectively into the blood and get them into your body so they can get to work.
So I know you mentioned to us, Chris, that you guys have been focused on the company, building it since 2014. You mentioned a little bit about patents. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about some of these patents?
Absolutely. So we do have one of the broadest and deepest patent portfolios, certainly in the cannabis sector, actually anywhere in the world. I don't think most people realize that. We have over 60 patents pending around the world, and in fact we also have 16 patents already granted for delivering drugs like cannabinoids into the bloodstream and into the brain, as I mentioned. But what a lot of people don't realize is that our patents also cover the delivery of nicotine, vitamins, even pain relief like NSAIDs, things that you might know as Advil or Motrin. We also have patents pending for things like human hormones, estrogen, testosterone, phosphodiesterase inhibitors on the pharmaceutical side. And this summer, in August of 2019, for the first time in our company history, we received 2 patents granted for treating medical conditions. Prior to that, all of our patents had been awarded for what's called method of use or composition of matter. And these are things like recipes or procedures. And we have 14 of those patents. But now we received our first 2 patents for treating things like heart disease, Alzheimer's, and even Parkinson's, utilizing things like cannabinoids or nicotine. So the company is really transitioning, as we always hoped to do, away from just strictly being a cannabis applicable story to being actually a true pharmaceutical, and that is underway now.
Well, that's obviously huge news for the company. Are there any milestones other than the patents that you can talk to us about?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think a lot of people realize, or if they don't, they should know that one of our biggest partners, well, certainly our biggest partner, is a company called Altria, which is a Fortune 100 company in the United States. They own the Marlboro cigarette brand, among other things. And Altria is very interested, and the tobacco and nicotine industry was very interested in our technology because we all hear the stories about currently about vaping, and there's some really sad stories coming out about that. But let's also not forget and not minimize the idea that, there's over 1,300 people a day still dying from cigarette use in America alone. So the health consequences of ingesting nicotine through pulmonary methods, whether that's vaping or combustion, are really, really serious. Our technology, Lexaria's technology, just might represent the world's first practical method of delivering nicotine through an oral method that never ever existed before, i.e. the idea that we can put it into a lozenge or even a cup of coffee in some jurisdictions without causing cancers or some of the other really terrible effects. So Altria is certainly one of the biggest things that people are watching for from us, and what they want to know, the investors want to know, is, well, how quickly might your tech show up in their products? We don't know that yet. We're still working on it. That is the basis of the agreement. But also I would always remind people that we have already signed a royalty agreement with Altria that they will pay us a royalty rate on global revenue from our tech in oral nicotine if they decide to use it that way. So it's a pretty transformative deal.
That's huge as well. What about the team that you guys have put together? I would imagine you guys have a lot of expertise when it comes to this space. Can you maybe elaborate on the team that you guys have brought together to see your company move forward?
Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed because I probably have the least education of anybody in the team. We have a number of really brilliant people. We hired another PhD head of research just a couple of months ago in our new Kelowna lab. John Doherty, our president, is well known as a former president of Helix Biopharmaceuticals in Toronto. Has 25 years or so in pharmaceuticals and biotech. Our advisory board has a half a dozen, world-renowned neuroscientists and so on as well on that. We work with University of British Columbia, Okanagan, Dr. Phil Ainsley, who's headed up one of our human clinical studies last year. We were just published in a peer-reviewed U.S. medical journal from that study. So we have some really, really incredibly talented men and women that are working with us. We also do a lot of work with the National Research Council here in Canada in their Halifax and Montreal labs. They've done a lot of our molecular characterization and a lot of our other work. So one thing that's important for people to realize is we publish a lot of data, and people should know that almost all of that data is produced in third-party labs, whether they're in the United States or Canada or in Europe. So although we do a lot of work in-house, we validate it with third-party researchers just to make sure that the data is sound.
Great. Being here at Extraordinary Futures, where do you see the space going in the next year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, I think we're starting to see it, certainly in the cannabis side, that it's not so much about cultivation as it is about delivery and product formats. So, you have to ask questions about dry beverages versus wet beverages, candies and chocolates versus capsules and syrups. There's all sorts of different ways. And then with us, because our tech is applicable for nicotine as well as cannabis ingredients, there's just a lot of different places where we play. So really, there's just a ton of expansion going on. And I think at the end of the day, what's important is, in a cost-effective way, delivering the smallest quantity of drug required to produce the required effect. And that's really what Lexaria is good at, because you don't want to introduce, whether it's Tylenol, whether it's ibuprofen, whether it's cannabis, you don't want to introduce more quantity than you need. And that is really where we play.
Chris, I think we've summarized the company and what you guys have been doing, where the company's headed, where the space is headed. I know you're really passionate about your company, the team, the space. What drives you? What excites you about this space?
Oh gosh, I've never had a chance to save lives or help people. I've been in many different sectors, mining, oil and gas, technology, over 30 years. I've never had the opportunity to make such a difference in people's lives. And I take phone calls from retail customers, even some of the scientists that we've talked to. I was on a call last week with a scientist saying, what we're seeing here, this data that we're looking at, this shouldn't be possible. And yet, here it is. So Lexaria has an opportunity to really change things. We've met with a lot of skepticism some years ago, and that is starting to go away. And we're starting to see the adoption of our processes in bigger applications. So I know it sounds incredibly corny, but we actually have a chance to change the world and make it better. And that's what gets me up every morning.
I love it, Chris. Again, it's always a pleasure when we get to spend some time with you and find out what you're up to. Until the next time, again, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.